Hey YouTube, this is my first ever vlog, or whatever they're called, and I was going to start it off with a music review, which is something that hits quite, close to me, seeing as though music is probably, as I'm sure with a lot of you, one of the biggest things in your life. It's pulled me through a lot of things, especially. The album I want to talk about today is Rage Against the Machine's debut album, which was one that really hit home to me, one that really encapsulated what I'd been missing out on in music. Personally, when I first heard this album, I think I was 13, 14 years of age maybe, so at this time I was probably listening to like Kings of Leon. I was a huge fan of Kings of Leon. I loved Green Day and I loved Blink-182 and things like that. I still might listen to them a little bit today, not as much as I used to back then, but like I said, this album especially was one that opened me up to such a broad scope of other music. When this album was released, obviously it was probably described as being like a culmination or like a mix of hard rock, hip hop and funk, and the funk element does come through on here quite strongly, especially with the contributions of Zach De La Rocha on vocals, who brings quite a fierce like a fierce spin on the irregular hip-hop vocals. They obviously follow a rhythm, they follow a style, they follow like a bar kind of influenced lyrical passage, and obviously some very, very interesting and quite quirky guitar work for its time from Tom Morello. The lineup of the band at this point was, as aforementioned, Zach De La Rocha on vocals, Tom Morello on guitar, Tim Comerford on bass, and Brad Wilk on drums. The thing that I think is quite overlooked with this album is the bass work, especially from Tim Comerford. I mean, when you will hear about Rage Against the Machine, you will hear a lot of, Tom Morello, really interesting guitar parts. Yeah, that is true, and, Zach De La Rocha brings a very trademark feel to the band that not many bands, if any band at this time, had this kind of style or niche. But the bass work on this is really, really overlooked in my opinion, especially when you look at tracks like Take the Power Back, which has a really fierce bass line, a groove that kind of sets the tone for the whole song. Other tracks like Freedom are really nice too. Know Your Enemy, Cleaning the Name Of, which was the huge track off here that got Rage some radio play back in the day. But yeah, this album is, in every sense of the word, I believe, a classic in the genre, and even just a classic for music in general, for what it did for me individually, and obviously what it did for people who'd not heard this kind of music before. The interesting thing about this album was it came in the grunge era, when Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, bands like that were releasing material, and this was a different path music was taken at the time. Like the 90s obviously had your house music, you had your grunge, you had your, in my opinion, your decline of thrash metal. The quality of thrash metal was kind of, towards the mid to the late 90s was having a bit of a rough time. But, going back to what I said before, this album is a solid work of funk, hard rock, and hip-hop. Take the opening track, Bomb Track, obviously, with the really, really heavy guitar riffs. Really, it's the thing that opens you up to the album. As soon as Zach De La Rocha comes in, the first thing you think is, this guy is angry. He's really angry. It's very politically driven. With that intro, that bum 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 bum, it really, really got to me at the time. I was like, I've been missing out on some good shit, really, considering this was probably 2007 when I heard it, because I'm 18 now, and obviously I mentioned that I heard this when I was 13. But yeah, it just such a solid selection of tracks. There wasn't a moment in this album when I felt bored. I felt like they were maybe repeating ideas a little bit, but they weren't repeating the ideas to the point where they were tedious. It's just a solid listen all the way through. And the track that follows, Bomb Track, Killing the Name Of, is a classic. I believe it to be one of the best tracks on the album. And then you've obviously got, and this is the interesting thing, when you get to track 3 with Settle for Nothing, things take a slower turn, and it's more of an ominous feel to the record. Obviously this record has quite an angry, angsty, politically driven feel, like I mentioned before, but Settle for Nothing more takes a route of very ominous. It threatens to explode, but it never does. It just keeps itself contained. Zach De La Roche is obviously threatening for the song to just kick into overdrive at any point, but it just gives a really, really nice, ominous feel in there. And, you know, the tracks after that just blast the way through. And then when you obviously get to the end of the record with Freedom, it's just the perfect closure on the record. You know, such ferocity coming through on that track. Really, really good closer. One of my favourite closers of all time, in fact. So basically, my thoughts on the debut from Rage Against the Machine, a true classic, if you ask me, and I'm sure if you ask a lot of fans at that time of the 90s movement, they'd say the same thing. You know, it's a very, very important record for music at the time. If you're wondering why maybe my face has come a bit closer, or there was a little cut there, my battery went on my recording device. So, but yeah, those are my thoughts, and you know, I don't know whether you thought this review went well. Obviously, my first experience doing a vlog. It's, you know, it's nice to actually get some of my views out there, you know, to you guys who obviously, you know, maybe you like listening to music reviews, maybe you stumbled across this somewhere, but yeah, feedback would be greatly appreciated. But that's all I've got to say on this. Yeah, if you enjoyed, then please leave a comment. Please give me some advice for future reviews or for future videos I'm going to do. And yeah, just thanks for watching, and have a nice day. Thank you.